Hello friends, Mel Jeffcoat here with another episode of my Ramon Llull Lullian Art series. And today we are going to get into figure T in a little bit more depth. Well, we're going to start anyway because there's a lot going on there and it's going to take a lot of videos to get through even just a first pass, but we'll get started today. Let's move on over to the computer screen. Okay, here we are with figure T. We've seen this diagram before, but we'll go over it again. So in this one, again, the letters appear to be out of order around the outside because they are attached to these triangles. So this first triangle is B, C, and D, difference, concordance, and contrariety. I'm going to talk about that first triangle today. So let's go over to a simplified diagram that I made that just shows that one triangle. It's a little bit bigger, easier to see, and you can see how the letters work with the triangle edges, corners. So difference and concordance rather. That's what we're going to talk about today because those two are related. If you take a look at this diagram, it's your standard two-item Venn diagram where the part that overlaps is concordance and the parts that don't overlap are the differences. Now, you can have two things that don't overlap at all, and so they are completely different. They have no concordance. Or you can have things that are related. They have some concordance, a lot of difference, or maybe they have an entirely concordant relationship. The only way to have an entirely concordant relationship is if they're identical. So most things have at least some difference, and they may or may not have concordance. So how do we use this in this triangle? You use this triangle to ask yourself questions. So if you are trying to study some relationship of anything, look for the differences and the concordances. And this is, of course, between any two things, because in this first triangle, it's looking at relationships between two things. You can't really look at the difference amongst yourself unless you divide yourself, and then you're talking about two things again. So difference and concordance are pretty self-explanatory. They're pretty easy, I think. So let's take a look at this third one, contrariety. That one is a little bit tougher because you might think that what you might think is contrariety might turn out to be difference and vice versa. So you really have to look at it closely to understand which one applies to what you're talking about. So the definition that I have down here on the bottom is actually from Ramon Llull, and he says that contrariety is mutual resistance due to divergent ends. And that is sort of the key here, in that I said this in an earlier video, but when you have contrariety, there is a connection. The two things are connected to each other even though they really don't want to be, because they have divergent ends. They want different things. If there are things that aren't connected at all, they're just different, then, and the term for that is orthogonal, then they don't have any contrariety. They don't have any relationship to each other at all. So contrariety is a very interesting part of Llull's system, because when you look at figure A, I'll go back to figure A so that we can take a look at that real quick. So figure A is God in this system, and one of the key things about God in Llull's worldview is that there is no contrariety amongst any of these attributes when they are applied to God. I talked last time about the levels of being and how God is one level and people are a different level. Down here on Earth, there's, to take an example, power and goodness. Well, how often are power and goodness actually the same thing on Earth? Usually it's one or the other, and oftentimes they are opposed. If somebody's trying to do something good and somebody else is just trying to become very powerful, and they are working in the same area and come into contact with each other, they're probably going to be opposed most of the time. Not all the time. So that's an example of contrariety. At the highest level, there is no contrariety. All of these attributes of God are not interchangeable, but the word that Llull used was convertible, which means you can say that great goodness is the same thing as good greatness, and powerful glory is the same thing as glorious power, and so on through any combination that you care to think of. And that convertibility is the hallmark of this highest level that figure A represents. In Llull's system, contrariety is what makes things make these different attributes break apart and recombine and actually create, the world as we know it, which I think is very interesting. Theologically, I'm not entirely certain that I agree with it, but it's a very interesting way to look at the world, and I think contrariety is a key to a lot of Llull's work. So that's it for difference, concordance, and contrariety for now. Next time I'll start talking about the other words around the edge of the circle and what they mean and how that guides the way that we use this circle. And we'll start getting into some actual examples because I'm sure this is all very abstract and you're trying to figure out what the utility is for this system. So let me know if you have any questions as we go along. I'd be happy to answer them in another video. And thanks for watching, and until next time, keep exploring.